Good. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. We're going to give a few minutes to allow folks to get in here and be a part of our live talk today. As many of you know, we've been discussing doing a live talk outside of the radio show. And so that's what we're doing today, tonight. It might be day, it might be morning, it might be night, it might be late night for some of y'all. I'm glad that everybody tuned in. We're going to be talking today about the importance of understanding our relationships. And I'm not going to just, this is kind of a talk, so it's not like I'm just going to carry the show like I do usually at the radio, because I can't be asking y'all's thoughts and can't be reading questions when we're on live air, because that's kind of tough. I could probably try it if we get it all set up right here in the future, like really get it good where we can kind of understand and I can see the questions, because sometimes I don't always see them, so it becomes a problem. So, oh, perfect. Okay, so there they are. Wow. George, good job. George shows me the light. Here we go. So now I can see some of y'all's comments right here. Good. Oh, this is great. Okay, I'm so glad. Now I can see the comments. Sometimes it's overwhelming, though. You know, when you're on the radio, it's down to the second, since it's a national show. So sometimes I get a little like, even though I've been doing it for 10 years, it still is interesting. So today, I just want to start talking about our life and our relationships and how we usually feel something is going wrong, and a lot of times how we find the issues in the situation. And a lot of times the things that we find wrong are, to me, are kind of guideposts, right? Like it's not necessarily like, oh my God, this is horrible. I mean, I'm sure that it's painful, but it's kind of a guidepost. It's kind of a, hey, aha situation, like this is happening, right? And so it's just kind of an indicator that something's off. A lot of the things that we find wrong, again, I like to use the word wrong, in quotes, is sometimes basically a symptom of the issue, right? So there's multiple things happening in the relationship. We catch on to it. And what's usually our stance? It's like, there's something wrong with them, or there's something massively wrong with me. And so many of us sit there and try to, beat our head against the wall, figuratively. What is it? What is wrong with me? Why is this happening? Is something? Am I missing something? Do I'm not understanding something? Is there something wrong? Or vice versa. We look at someone else. We're like, why are they acting like this? What is going on? Like we finally have that aha moment where we realize something's not exactly right. And I think that's a really powerful place to be, because we also, all of a sudden, we kind of get ourselves aware that there's something else happening. Okay, so when we realize that these issues are kind of the guideposts that we need to fix something, or we don't really fix anything until we understand what we're dealing with, right? So we have to deal with the situation first. We have to see it for what it is. And then we have to honestly look at it from all angles, right? It's like when you're trying to fix something, you don't just jump in and assume, okay, this is the problem. Like the car's not running. We automatically don't just assume it's the alternator and go out and buy a new alternator, right? We probably check to make sure we have gas. We probably make sure that the battery's not dead. We probably, there's multiple things we do before we just jump in and solve the issue, right? And a lot of times too, the process of solving it is learning, right? It's about learning about who we are and understanding, what are we doing here? What is the thing? Why am I in this? Because I think a lot of times too, when we have problems in our relationships, we immediately assume that we've created this horrible situation. There's nothing good that comes out of it. And we just screwed up again, Okay. I mean, I think that's where a lot of us feel, right? But the thing is really quite the opposite. And I know that this is kind of a juxtaposition to what we think, but when we do have issues in relationships, it's like the aha opportunity moment for us to begin to understand, why is this happening? And if it's been something that's happened on multiple occasions with multiple people, or multiple occasions with the same person, this is an awareness piece, right? This is okay, I'm getting a wake up call. Where is this coming from? Where has this gotten me from? So let's talk about that tonight. If y'all have some questions, go on and add them into the comments. But I'm gonna keep rolling. So it's good to see y'all. Lisa, thank you for tuning in. Diane, thank you for tuning in. Great to see you. Jasmine, great to see you. Jamie Rose, great to see you. How are you doing? Zen and me, great to see you. Ocean, great to see you. We could talk about BPD for sure. But what I'm thinking here is that too, let's look at the fact of, okay, in these relationships, first off, when we have these existing issues, let's say like we meet somebody and we have some of the same dynamics, right? A lot of times those dynamics go back to our childhood. And so we've experienced that. And so, for example, if some of y'all might say, hey, well, I'm in a relationship with someone that I feel has BPD, or symptoms or signs of BPD. And you know how I feel. And I think if you've listened to me long enough, you know that, when it comes to like cluster B and different dynamics like that, I feel like all this can be solved, right? And it all can be worked on. But the person that's dealing with it has to accept it and then see the beginnings of the program. Because I believe that a lot of this is programming, whether it's genetic or environmental. I think that we can, if we're willing to make changes and willing to see that we owe ourselves a better life, then I think it can kind of open up to a different awareness. Now, I agree that there are some folks that believe that there's nothing wrong. I agree that some people don't want to get any help. Okay, and I understand that too. And that's always a big red flag, is that if we're in a relationship with someone that doesn't want to get any help, doesn't want to talk about their true feelings, doesn't want to open up and deal with what's really happening, and they're not willing to make any strides and not willing to be aware of what's happening, then we probably have a bit of more of an issue, right? So I feel that it's really interesting that many of us are dealing with these types of relationships. Now, what I found, though, is that a lot of times the relationship directly relates to our fear, right? Our greatest fear or our core wounds, right? And I find that it's interesting. A lot of us have fears of abandonment. Many of us have fear of rejection. Many of us have fear of even being in a relationship at all. And, it's interesting because these different fears create these different realities for us, and our brain kind of changes it all around, right? Our brain, the fear that we have in our mind, the stuff that our brain is telling us, is really kind of disproportionate from our fear, so it kind of hides it. Okay, so like let me give you an example. So if we have a fear of rejection, okay, and this is how the brain works, right? If we have a fear of rejection, we have a tendency of rejecting other people before they can reject us, right? I mean, that's key, right? If I have a fear of rejection, I'm not even going to have a second date with somebody. I'm going to find the faults and problems with each and every person that I meet. I'm going to quickly disqualify people that I might meet on a dating site. I might quickly disqualify somebody because of something they said or something they wore. All of this is created so that I don't have to deal with rejection. Now, but it looks like, and it morphs into the fact that this person's not right for me, or I feel like this person might have problems or whatever. So it shows up in a different way, right? And a lot of times it shows up as if we're solving an issue. But what we're doing is we're really hiding really what's at the core of our fear, right? And so, when we talk about different relationships and we look at how we're connected, it's always very interesting how people connect with different vibes, right? With different people. And a lot of times, so for example, let's say that somebody has a fear of abandonment, right? Okay, what happens in a lot of these relationships is they usually find someone that might be more on that codependent program, right? So more codependent, always there, will take the blame for a lot of things, because they've been, programmed to going through childhood usually. And so they're used to being the person that acquiesces. They're used to being the person, you're right. They're used to being the person that just kind of goes along to get along, even though sometimes it can be really, really overwhelming. And so a lot of times a person with abandonment fear will connect with somebody with codependency. Now, the interesting part though about this, and I find is that what happens eventually is the person that actually has fear of abandonment will actually abandon the other person usually first. And they do that because they don't want to be abandoned first. They do that because that's part of the programming. Okay. And so I always find this interesting. I find it very interesting because our fears, because of our brain, is always solving issues, right? It's constantly kind of covering up the core fears that we have that actually kind of puts us in a deficit. Because what I found is that when there is an issue, like for example, let's say like you've been doing your research and you realize, okay, isn't it interesting how I feel like I might be in a relationship with someone with cluster B and I'm just now really seeing it, right? I've been watching videos on YouTube, I've been watching some different things and I'm just now seeing it. And it's starting to compute in my brain and I'm starting to say, oh my gosh, okay, this is starting to make sense. Like what was going on is starting to make sense because I thought I was losing it. And you start realizing, and it's like, well, better yet, let's keep going into understanding the other person, and that program of that other person can be very helpful. But let's even go a step further, right? So we're understanding the program that the other person's on. We begin to understand what's happening. Because first, I don't want you to ever stop exploring that part in the very beginning, because many of you felt like you've been in the dark. Right? You felt like you were in the dark. You felt like you didn't understand what was going on because there was nobody that pulled you aside back in school and said, hey, these are the different types of, personality disorders. These are the different types of programming that people have, being aware of certain things, understanding certain things, and understanding the way we were raised as children, right? And understanding, being able to pull that back and seeing, okay, even though I was raised by these folks and they did the best they could, was it perfect? No. Okay. What were some of the things that could have been different? And I know that many of us look back at our family and some of us we don't want to ever say anything negative. And I'm not looking for you to have to say negative things, but I think many of us went through what I would consider pretty unhealthy family dynamics. Okay. It's very interesting how many people have gone through fairly unhealthy family dynamics. And a lot of times we don't know. We just don't know it. It's not like, and I like to say this, it's not like there was, like the game shows where there's like door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. It wasn't like there were multiple families behind these doors. And right after you were born, it was like, okay, or before you're born, which family do you want to go to? Let's question and answer for the next 10 days, get to understand mom and dad real well from these 20 families, right? We didn't get that. And we didn't understand healthy versus unhealthy. We just knew normal, the way we were raised. You hear people say, well, the way I was raised, how I was raised, my family, all of that is based on their life. It's not based on what was positive or negative, healthy or unhealthy. It's just the way I was raised. And I look at that and I realize that the way we were raised directly relates to if we see the red flags in the beginning or if we don't. Many of us get in these relationships, and I know some of you are saying, yeah, exactly. I'm seeing the red flags now. In the very beginning, I felt it, but I didn't really acknowledge it. Or I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Or even better yet, I had some questions in my mind, but I kind of thought it must be my issue. Or I'm just going to let it go because I'm just being too overly, it's just too much. I just need to be more calm, or I need to, whatever. And it's interesting how many of us will sit back and tell ourselves that there's something wrong with us to stay in the relationship, right? And I know that a lot of you that watch some of my content or are, or followers here on YouTube or on my social media or know kind of the direction that I normally head. I'm kind of coming from the position of understanding the codependent program and the recovering codependent, right? And it's not just that, but understanding why and how we got there. And then how we normally interact with other people's programs. And this is really powerful because once we begin to understand that part, we begin to understand why we do what we do. We even begin to understand why we picked who we picked. That's one of the big things. And I've worked with folks that say, anytime I walk into a room, I'm going to pick anybody that has narcissism. I'm the narcissistic magnet. And it's like, well, I don't know if that's the case. But what I do think is that what happens here is that we actually end up finding those same personalities that we're around, right? We've been around for a long time. We've been around in the family dynamic, and we keep finding them over and over again because that's the norm. That's our norm. And the norm is what keeps going, right? When people say, the cycle perpetuates, right? Like what? Okay, let's go extreme. When people talk about violence in the household, spousal abuse, spousal physical abuse, and you hear a lot of the stories, and I'm not saying every single one, okay, but I'm saying the majority. Okay, let's just say that the majority of people that beat up their significant other saw one of their family members do the same to the other family member. Okay. The majority. I'm not saying all the time. I'm not saying 90%. I'm just saying the majority. Okay. So what I mean by that is that when they saw that, even though to some degree they probably knew that's not right, but yet it still happens in their life, right? So they get married, and the next thing you know, they're beating up their spouse, and it could be a woman beating a man or a man beating a woman. Okay, let's not just put it in the terms of the men beating women, because we've seen things like this happen. And it's interesting because when you go down that scenario and you walk down it, we talk about the cycle, right? Well, it doesn't have to be a physical beating. But do you see, it's like if we're raised in the dynamic where we saw, for example, mom and dad, and let's say that, and I think this is interesting, this is something I definitely want to share with you, is I've been realizing lately that, I work with folks and they'll be like, hey, I really love my dad, but my dad is, he's kind of like, he doesn't stand up for himself. He doesn't stand up for himself. My mom walks all over him, And it's interesting because, I'll bring up the fact, I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you were in a relationship with someone for 25 years and everything you did wasn't right, in the beginning, everything was perfect, right? And you were this amazing being put on this pedestal. Life is so great. You can't do anything wrong. And then all of a sudden you become this person that can't do anything right. And everything you do is questioned, and everything you do is a problem, and then they beat you down for it day in and day out. Could you go 25 years with that? And how would you be at 25 years dealing with that day in and day out, feeling as though you can't leave the relationship, overwhelmed by the toxicity of it, but because it's become your normal, you can't leave, so you're basically a slave in your own life. And the last thing you want to do is have an argument with your significant other that's going to beat you into the ground. Okay. And so that's why I point that out to clients that bring that up. And I said, the reason why your father is acting like that, you call it a pansy. Your father's acting like that so he doesn't have to deal with the heat. He's had enough heat. He's probably stood up multiple times, been beaten down multiple times, and decided to acquiesce. And a lot of times in those situations, you'll see people that escape, right? They escape with drugs, alcohol, pharmaceuticals. I mean, even weed, whatever it needs to happen for them to escape to some degree so they get to a place that they don't hear it anymore, right? And that's interesting. Like, you see people check out, right? Eventually you see people kind of check out. And I'm not talking about, killing, ending their life, but they check out, okay? They're not really there. They're not present anymore. I mean, if you go to like family functions or like, Christmas dinners or whatever, and you're interacting with mom and dad at that point, the one that's checked out is checked out because they can't handle it anymore. Okay, they can't be them because why? Because they're not emotionally allowed to be themselves. Okay, they've been taught through years of conditioning that my emotions and feelings don't matter. Okay, now I want you to think about that. How often are you in a relationship right now, or have you ever been in a relationship right now that your feelings and emotions didn't matter? And I want you to think about that because this is a big deal. Because if you can't express yourself, or when you express yourself, the other person gets very angry or standoffish or gives you the silent treatment, okay, or leaves or whatever, or won't call you or, or ghosts you or whatever it is and comes back around later on, you're in a relationship where that person is not allowing you to have feelings or emotions, okay, bottom line. A lot of us are in those relationships, right? Where when we try to express ourselves, the other person, like, a lot of times if you're looking at the narcissistic programming, if you try to express the feelings you have or something that happened to you the other day, it always turns back to them. What happened to them, or what they're dealing with, or the problems or issues they're going through, and how much worse their problems and issues are. If you're dealing with another type of program, right? You see how when you bring up your feelings, that person will show you how your feelings hurt them, how your feelings, how what you're saying is abusive, how it's manipulative. It's like you can't ever get away with just talking about how you feel. right? And it's not, and I think, I mean, I'm not talking about like pointing blame and you made me do this and you're a horrible person. I'm talking about the fact that things happen in life, and I just wanted to share this with my significant other. Okay. And I know that many of you feel as though you can't share it. And I'm looking at some of y'all's comments here on the feed and talking about unhealthy family dynamics are very difficult to walk away. It does take strength. Yeah, and it's so true. The family dynamic, how different we are with each other. And I like what you're saying because, it's interesting because when you look at this concept and you look at the family dynamic and you see what was presented to us, and some of you might have been raised by other people, grandma, grandpa, uncle, whatever, mom, dad, two moms, two dads, whatever. When we look at the concept of that and we see their personalities and what they were in the relationship, we begin to understand what we are drawn to. Now, we're drawn to things that are our normal. We're not drawn to things that are our healthy. Okay, so big difference. I always think it's interesting when people use the word normal. Okay, yeah, just get rid of it. I don't even know what normal is. Okay, normal to me is just been around it many times, seen it, same shit, different day. That's normal. Okay, doesn't mean it's great. Just means we see it all the time. So that's why I think when we look at these types of relationships and we understand where we stand and who we are, we begin to understand other people and why we're interacting with them. So what I like to do is if you find yourself in a relationship right now that is causing you stress, anxiety, where is the stress and anxiety coming from? Why is it coming from? Where is it coming from? And what is the other person acting, doing, saying that's creating even more stress? Because a lot of times it's what they're doing, but it's also how we're playing into what they're doing, right? It takes two. So if somebody goes off the handle and loses it, and we have a tendency of doing the same thing because we can't hold it together because our blood's boiling, right? The thing is that even though it's so hard to control your emotions because when you're emotionally invested in something, right? But at the same time, if we actually were to control our emotions and to step back, what would happen? That person would actually, they could probably still escalate, but they wouldn't have anybody to escalate with. And it's interesting when we deal with certain people's programming, the idea of escalation is part of their program. They constantly go to Mach 5. They constantly go there, right? And a lot of times, why do they do that? To shut us down. Okay. If I'm yelling at you and screaming at you, guess what? Most of the time you're going to acquiesce, shut up, be quiet, go into your place, be in your place, do your thing, and we're going to move on. Now, the interesting part about that is that same person will not apologize. And if they do, it's going to be a very flimsy apology. Okay. And maybe they decide to be nice to you a little bit. It's interesting, the breadcrumbing, the little nuggets. Here's a little piece of nugget here. Here's a little breadcrumb. Here you go. And it's interesting how we can go from a horrible situation one night to the next night, having a little bit of, it seems like they seem to be nicer. Oh, they got closer to me on the couch. Okay, things are getting good. And we forget, right? We keep doing that. We keep forgetting what's really happening because it's easier for us to forget, right? We're not really forgetting. We just keep sweeping it under the rugs. We've done it for so long. But if you really think about it, how often the cycle and the pattern that we're constantly experiencing. And that's something I really want us to think about. If you're in a cycle or pattern in a relationship right now, what does that look like? What does that cycle or pattern look like? Think about it. And if it's a constant up and down, up and down, up and down, why do we keep acquiescing when they're nice or not so mean? I mean, because some of the times when I work with folks, it's not like the other person's being nice. They're just not being mean at that time. I mean, they're just not yelling or throwing things, and maybe they might get a pat on the back or something. It's not like it's like this amazing outward sign of affirmation and positivity. But you see what I'm saying? It's like, what is getting us to continue to keep coming back? And why do we want that? And I think that's a great question that we have to really think about because it all goes back to our programming, right? It goes back to what we've seen in the household. It goes back to what we've done. And I look back at, and I've talked about this before, I look back at my own household and my parents are great. Everybody has flaws, right? I have flaws. Everybody has flaws. But, I watched my mom and my mom was more codependent, right? I mean, more codependent nature, and watching her interact, and me looking at that. Nothing wrong about being codependent programming. It's just the way it is. She was raised in that environment where she had to help everybody. She was the problem solver. She was the savior. She was the one that helped her sister. She was the one that tried to solve the problem. She was there trying to help mom make ends meet. She was working when she shouldn't probably have been working. She was too young to work. You see what I'm saying? Get the thought process, because many of you are on that program. Okay. And so watching her growing up, that's what I thought every woman did. I thought every woman just, took care of everybody, and every woman was there to do this and that, and every woman would accept what was going on and be okay with it. And even if somebody outburst, they would calm them down. You know what I'm saying? And that was what you kind of saw, and you kind of believed that was the truth. Like, everybody lived that truth. That's everybody's life, right? Hell no, it's not everybody's life. But when we're seeing it for real, we go, yeah, that's it. And we don't realize every single day that's subconsciously interfacing in our brain. Every single day watching mom acquiesce. Every single day we see mom doing something. Every single day we see mom doing 101 things, right? And then it's like you see the interaction between her and my dad, and that was very interesting to watch too. But see, at the time I had no idea what was going on. And I know that many of you say, God, I can't believe I'm in another relationship, that I'm dealing with this, and I just seem to not be able to pick people right. But it's like, are we not picking right, or is it the lesson that we haven't learned yet? And I really think it's the lesson we haven't learned yet. Because I keep thinking we keep getting the same lessons over and over again until we get it right. Okay, seriously. You got to get it right eventually at one point in time. It's like if you're trying to, compete, and you're trying to you're trying to try out for the Olympics. You got to keep doing it until you get it right. Nobody's going to be like, you got close. It's close. No. We don't get close in learning about ourselves, right? We don't get close. The universe doesn't go, you were close. You didn't really get there, but you kind of scratched on the surface a little bit. But see, especially when we have these relationships that are consistently the similar type patterns, and it's like, it's getting to know what they're about first, for sure. But then it's turning it back on us with that spotlight and saying, okay, why did I pick this person? Why did I choose this type of relationship? What's at my core that I need to look at, understand, and educate myself? Because we don't stop the program, no matter what it is, until we recognize the program and then see it for what it is. And I've realized that the more and more we wake up to the cycles that we're in, the more we're getting more aware of who we are. Okay, some people say, God, I can't believe I just recognized this in my life, and I can't believe this is happening. I mean, I feel like such a failure. But it's like, are you a failure, or actually is it quite the opposite? You've actually awakened to beginning to see your truth. The more that we begin to see our relationships truly as they are, the more that we understand ourselves completely. See, that's what we're going for. And I know that you've heard me say this before, because people, they question, so cute. We have a squirrel sitting on the tree right now. Well, maybe George can get a picture for us if you can, because he's watching right here. It's cool. I mean, I think he's got some relationship stuff he wants to deal with. And we can get a good picture of him. If you can, put it on the feed. That would be awesome. But it's like, think about it. It's like when you're looking at the situation as it is, and you're understanding it, and you begin to see, you're peeling those layers back, peel the layer, and sometimes you kind of get, I don't know if I like this. But when we don't like something and it makes us uncomfortable, guess what? It means that we're awakening to our truth. It means that we're actually seeing a little bit beneath who we identify as publicly, and we begin to realize, okay, this is what I've been exposed to. So instead of seeing it as a problem, see it as an opportunity. Okay. Like when I talk about that on purpose on the show, and I talk about how people usually confuse purpose with this outward thing that they need to do, this outward thing that they have to do, this work that they need to do, this charity they need to start, or whatever they want to do. That's really not purpose. Now that's action, and that's doing something. But purpose is actually learning who you are. Purpose, and not just, my name and what I like and my favorite color. No. I mean, purpose is deep. It is literally like deconstructing and reconstructing yourself, every single cell, and learning who you are. And each relationship that we are given or choose was actually chosen, I believe, subconsciously by ourselves to maximize the opportunity to get to learn who we are. And that's what I feel. And if you really think about it, there's been some relationships that you probably do not, probably not happy with. There's probably some relationships that you would wish that you never had. There's probably some people's name that you wish you didn't remember. But what did we learn in some of those situations that actually helped us to understand who we are? And that's the question. And so when we talk in these talks, I'm so glad that y'all are here for the first talk here outside of the radio show. When we talk about that, it's like what we're learning is not about painful about who we are. It's about what we're learning is purpose driven. That's what's powerful, right? So we're actually driving on purpose. Nishant, great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Zen and me had a narcissistic father, a narcissistic sister, really screw with your mind. Yeah, father passed, sister and I cut contact with finally. The fact that she has tried to speak to me confirms it. It's interesting, when you're dealing with that type of dynamic, it's like you got to really think about too. There are some folks that you want to work out a relationship with, and there are some folks that you don't need to work out a relationship with. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that when we want to work out a relationship with somebody, we want to make sure that there is some sort of mutual respect. We don't want to acquiesce back to old programming just to give in. Oh, okay, I'm just going to give in. I'm going to sacrifice myself. And the last time you sacrificed yourself, right? When you agreed to do something or just stayed quiet when you shouldn't have. You know how painful that is. Now, a lot of times we're in relationships where we do that all the time, right? And so in those types of relationships where our emotions cannot be heard, and anytime that we bring up our feelings, they're bashed or made fun of or what have you, or mocked. Those are the relationships that we really need to question. What is the reason for my involvement? Okay. I want you to think about that. What's the reason for my involvement? And like TL said, it's important to not tolerate bad behavior. And that's true. And that's important. But the thing is, too, is it's like when we look at bad behavior from somebody, one, what's creating that program in their brain that they think that's okay to do that to us? And then have we allowed them to do that in the past, and that makes them feel like it's okay for them to do that to us? You see what I'm saying? Like, boundaries are a lot easier created with new relationships, right? We know that. However, when we can create boundaries with old relationships, that means when we begin to master ourselves. But boundaries are created by our values. And that's something that I work on with family, friends, clients. Anybody that's around me knows that we deal with values and really understand that, because values are literally the precursor for us to develop our complete and understanding of boundaries based on those values. Nelson, great to hear from you. And that's what I want you to think about too, is that are there values right now that you value? Are there things in your life that you value that you're not being able to value, you're not being able to respect, you're not being able to live by? Think about that. That's a deep question. And there's some stuff that I say on the radio and on the show and on the radios. I know sometimes it goes quick, but if you think about it, are there some things right now in your life that you're not being able to live by because the other person with you does not accept that, or they don't like it, or they don't respect it? I want you to think about it, because this is a huge piece of the puzzle. And we don't know that so well until we actually look at what we really value. And we don't know what we really value until we really begin to ask the big questions. And then we have to build up on the self-esteem and the personal belief. And to be able to convey the message, to be able to live by this stuff, right? It's easier said than done. A lot of people say, oh, you got to create boundaries. That's great. What is it? They don't even know what boundaries are. I mean, there's books out here that really talk about boundaries, but they don't even explain what they are. I mean, it's just like, it's like word salad. And so it's like, if you're really going to create a boundary, you got to know what a damn boundary is, and you got to create it from your values, and the values have to be direct, and they can't be the stuff that your parents taught you, and they can't be the stuff that mom and dad live by. It's got to be the stuff we really believe in, and it can't be your spouse's values or your sifting together. It can't. And that's what that's like I could go around the world, prophesizing and go around the world, talking about that in revivals all day, every day, because this is the basis of who we are. And if you understand the basis of who you are and you begin to see that every day and every day and every day and every day, when somebody's screwing with you or trying to hurt you based on that, you see it coming a mile away. And then you decide what you got to do with it. And that's another level of it, right? Then that's when we decide how much is too much. How much was that we had enough? And then at what point in time do we be honest with the other person? Because you know what? They might not like it, but guess what? They might learn something. And we also have to take the position of, you know what? I'm okay with losing this if I have to. Because it's not the end of the world. Okay, Dark Radica, great to hear from you. I'm in a relationship with a BPD woman addicted to crack. The sex makes it really hard to cut loose from her. Oh wow, that's a challenging one. Okay, so not only do you have somebody on that program, you have somebody on that program who is doing a highly addictive drug. And then I feel like you've also become addicted not only to the sex component, but you've also become addicted to the relationship itself because of the extreme ups and downs and because you've been put on this pedestal multiple times and probably picked yourself up, put you back on the pedestal, and that addictive quality that we get a lot of times when we're trying to figure out how do we jump back in, how do we get back in the good graces. So there's a lot of levels of addiction here because these types of relationships can be very addictive. And then you add the drug component and the sex component. That can be very hard. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is the thing where we got to kind of separate some of our emotions. And the first thing that we have to do in these situations, and I know that's not the easiest thing to talk about and might not be what you want to hear. I know it's not what you want to hear. We got to cut the sex at some point to be able to actually communicate and see if we can salvage this relationship. Because the sex keeps changing it. Right? The sex keeps changing it because we might have a great sexual experience, but the relationship itself has all these issues. And we need to, the next thing too is that if she really cared about herself in any way, she wouldn't be doing crack, right? I mean, because it's not a healthy drug. And so we look at it and realize that she doesn't care about herself. How could she care about you? There's levels of that. And so being able to have that conversation starts with not being inundated in the emotional blender, which the first thing we have to take ourselves out of is physical, is like, the physicality of it. Second of all, we'd have to get help with her addiction, and try to get her off crack. And then third, you would have to meet together and see if this could be salvaged. You know what I'm saying? But her on drugs is going to be a problem because she's already disassociating and already separating herself probably, and the drug is just acting the next component. Let me know if you have any other questions because I definitely understand that. Jamie Rose, I agree. My higher power will keep presenting the same issues until I handle it. So true. That is so true. Because see, remember, the universe is going to keep handing us what we haven't dealt with. It's like solving an issue. You remember in school when we were kids, right? And you got a test, right? And you scored low on the test or the quiz, and then your teacher give you the C or whatever back, and you get and you eventually have another test to see if you got it. Eventually there's a freaking semester exam to see if you got it. I mean, come on. I mean, we learned this back in school, right? And so I totally get it, Jamie. I'm glad you said that. We get the same lessons, not about school, but we get the same lessons in ourselves, right? And we have to deal with it. And that's something that I want you to really think about. That's something that, I mean, that's it. That's the key. That's the part of it. That's the je ne sais quoi, is to understand that we have to understand that. We have to be aware of that. And it's like NJNP. Thank you so much. Oh, I appreciate your message. That's so sweet. Thank you. Jasmine, I always want to work out all the relationships. And that's true. It's like a lot of times we get into that role of wanting to work out everything. We want to make everything perfect. We want to make everything work, right? And a lot of times that can be what? One, either we feel like we have to because that's how we were raised. Many of you might have been raised around a lot of people on the narcissistic programming, right? And in that programming, it's interesting how you became that one that was like the glue that held everybody together in the family, right? You were the one that would solve problems. You were the ones that would be there. You were the one that would acquiesce. You were the one that would sacrifice yourself, right? All these different things. And then we go into our first relationship with the first person we date, and guess what? We become the problem solver. We become the person that takes, okay, I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to help that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to help you with this. And we feel used and we feel resentful. And then we find someone else and we feel the same. We feel used and taken advantage of. And somebody might be calling us names and then in the same, in the same breath telling us how much they care about us. And, that's because they need something. That's because they're based on their own fear of losing us, not necessarily based on the fact that the relationship, that they see the value of you. They can't see the value of you unless they can see the value of themselves. And if you get one thing out of today's talk, that's it. That's the key, is that if somebody doesn't see the value in themselves, they sure hell can't see the value in you. They can't. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like you got people in your life that'll sit there and call you names. And many of you know what I'm saying. They'll call you names. They'll text you some stuff. I was working with some clients today, and some of the stuff was really challenging. And some of the words that were used and some of the, I can't say them on here because I don't want to bring that up, but some of the words that were being used and some of the cuss words and some of the other words that were being used, the other words, the C words and all this stuff to describe somebody. I can't even believe somebody would actually be able to say that to someone else, right? Especially someone they love. What kind of love do you have for me that you can say something that horrible to me and be okay with it? And then in an hour or two later, spin it all back around and tell me how much you care about me. It's not right. And what that means to me is to take yourself out of the equation for one moment. Just take yourself out of the equation, all of y'all that have been in this situation. Don't look at it so much as the names that they're calling you. Look at how they act about themselves. Now, somebody that has narcissistic tendencies, it's very interesting because you know what's at their core? What's at their core is fear. What's at their core is that they're not good enough. That's the core of the narcissist. It always has been. Okay? But what do you do when you don't feel that you're good enough? You hide it. You mask it. You create this whole outside persona. You put people down. You tear them down. You tear them apart, right? Because guess what? If I tear you down enough, you're going to be there. Because you're going to have nobody else to go to. Because nobody else is going to take you. Right? I mean, you're lucky to have me. God bless. I deal with your crap every day. Do you see how that type of conversation drives it? And that's what I want us to think about is let's not always look at what they're saying to us. Let's look at how they really treat themselves. And I know many of you say, well, they don't treat themselves that bad. They're constantly playing video games, or they haven't worked in 2 years, or, the list goes on. Or they don't take care of their health, or they're smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, or they're smoking weed all day long. You know what I mean? That's okay. So think about that type of behavior. Is somebody that's doing that, do they love themselves? Do they even respect themselves? No, not at all. There's not one way, okay? Because that's not the way that we live a successful life at all, right? Okay, so if somebody's smoking crack, do they respect themselves? Hell no. Okay, so it's if they're doing that and they don't respect themselves, they don't love themselves because you don't want to. Crack isn't good for you. Smoking 3 packs of cigarettes isn't good for you. Drinking 2, fizz of alcohol isn't good for you. And you're with somebody that's doing that day in and day out. Someone that hasn't had a job in years. Somebody that doesn't want to take care of themselves. Somebody that doesn't go shower. So, you're sitting there going, man, my boyfriend, girlfriend hadn't showered in 5 days. That's not somebody that loves themselves. They don't even like themselves. They can't even stand themselves. They loathe themselves. They hate themselves. So if you think that somebody that hates themselves is going to love you, we got another thing coming. And that's really the big kahuna. Okay. And we can do a show after conversation after conversation on that, because I've realized that anytime I was in a relationship in the past with somebody that did not like themselves, what did they do to me? They hated on me. And anytime that I did something good or something successful or valuable, it was belittled. Okay. There might have been a moment where they were like happy for me because they could show everybody else what I had done, right? Look what she did. Oh my God. I was on display, right? I was on display for everybody. I was on display for social media, but behind closed doors, it was going to be a beatdown, right? It was going to be a beatdown. You're going to hear about how horrible you are. It was all going to turn around anyway, right? So think about it. It's like, that's what they do because they're doing that to themselves every day. And even though they're outwardly cocky about stuff, what they're doing every day is they're beating themselves down. We don't need to sit there and feel sorry for them. Okay, that's another part though, is that then you go, but I feel sorry for him because, he's just so sad, or I feel sorry for her. And I get it. I understand that. But the feeling sorry for them is another program. I mean, it really is. And I mean, I should do a whole show maybe on Saturday about that. The feeling sorry for them after they hurt us is a program. And what does that program do? It's devised to keep us in the system. It's devised to keep us there. Because guess what? We've been doing this the whole damn time. It feels good. I like it. It feels real good. Yum, yum, yum. This is nice. This bed of nails. God, sucks. Most of them are rusted too. It's like, oh, I'm going to get something from this, right? Oh, no. Think about it. That's the key. It's like we do that. So what happens is they're nice, and then they beat us down, and then they show themselves just a little bit that fear. And then we go, oh, God. I feel so sorry for them. They're just a wounded child. Well, yeah, but we're all wounded children. We're all wounded children, right? It's like, come on. But the only way that we begin to wake up from that woundedness is what? Is we begin to put our power out there and not accept the stuff that we have in the past. We treat people how we want to be treated. Yes, Jamie, that's a great comment. We treat people how we want to be treated. But some people don't do that. Some people don't do that at all. I mean, yeah, I treat people the way I want to be treated. I treat people with love and respect. And I'm not going to stop treating people with love and respect. I'm going to give unconditional love all the time. I can give unconditional love from afar. I don't have to hang out with someone, and I don't have to respect them. That's the key. Respect and love, two different things. So it's like, okay, I don't have to always hang out with somebody, and I can like somebody from afar. And that goes to family and friends. Right? Don't just think that family is already set up here. Don't say, oh, well, family, it's family, so I can't leave family. Oh, God, it's my family. And, family's blood. And we're supposed to be tighter than, it's blood. Who cares? I mean, we can pick our own family, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, and some of the family members need to be examined. I mean, how many people do we have in the family that you talk to that are naysayers that put you down? Think about it. How many people you acquiesce to? Make you feel bad when you see them. That's not right. That's certainly not a family. It's a label of a family, right? Great to see you, Naz. How are you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Diane, I love that. Silence is acceptance. That's so true. Silence is acceptance. And there's times and places to say something, right? Some are better than others. But one of the things that I figured out too is that we have to have enough emotional distance to be able to speak our truth without getting emotionally like, you know what I mean? Because you kind of sometimes you held it back so much, you got so much resentment, right? You got to be careful. So we got to speak the truth in the positive way as much as we can, and be able to deliver the message as positively as we can. And sometimes that can be tough. And sometimes the day that we want to do it might not be the day that we're supposed to set up for this. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Lisa, good to hear from you. I love my husband. Happened 10 years ago, but not get it off my mind or my heart. Now, yeah. So anybody that's here online right now, let's talk that y'all are talking. If you've had a family member, if you had a spouse that's had an affair, whether it was a texting affair, an emotional affair, a sexual affair, whatever the affair is, it's really hard to have that trust, right? Because the trust has to be recreated. And sometimes the trust was never really there to begin with. But the biggest thing is that a lot of times when somebody has an affair and they go through the process, they have to accept the fact that the other person, do you mind turning the air on? It is hot in here. Thank you, sweetie. George is going to turn the AC on. We're dying in here, dying. Sometimes we have to understand that the affair itself, we have to sit there and have the conversation. What was it about? The other person needs to know why they had the affair. The other person needs to get real about that. Then we have to be able to get real about our feelings. Right? And then a lot of times when people get over the affair themselves, they don't let the other person get over it. They don't let the other person talk about it. They just want to, push it under the rug. And there has to be a place where both people can talk in a safe environment without the person that had the affair trying to shut up the other person. I get it. You might have already felt guilt and shame for it. We're not going to sit there and underestimate the guilt and shame. But at the same point, everybody needs to be able to speak their truth. And I think it has to be done in a way that everybody feels heard. And I think that's a very important part. Nelson, great to hear you. Great to hear from you. How are you doing? Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, when are you going to get over it? That does hurt. And it's interesting. Jasmine, you're right. Establishing and respecting boundaries is so important, and that's important. But we have to create those boundaries correct. We have to get that part. We have to see that. We have to understand that. But we have to see what our boundaries are. We have to see those values and see. Let's go back to the narcissistic. Let's go back to that concept of somebody's calling us names that or putting us down that we're in a relationship with, and they're devaluing us. They're putting us down. They're hurting us. Is that acceptable behavior? Would we do that to someone else? Now, I'm not saying in retaliation, even though I don't agree with retaliation. It can be hard emotionally not to retaliate, right? Let's be honest. But outside of retaliation, would you do this without being pushed? Would you ever respond to that person that way? Would that ever come out of your mouth? That's the question. And it's interesting, Jamie. Good question. How can you tell the difference between compliments versus being put on the pedestal? Okay, compliments are great. The pedestal has a big fall. Okay, so the difference between compliments and pedestal is that over time, the person that puts you on the pedestal is going to pull you off, drag you down, and kick you. That's just the way it is. You will have done the worst wrong. There will be a part where you are painted black. And that's what's so painful, is that when you get painted black, you've gone from this extreme that was so great. You're like, wow, this feels great. This person loves me. I can't do any wrong. And then all of a sudden, bam, you just did something wrong and you don't know why. And that's why you sit there and you try to make it up or do extra things or buy gifts or do whatever you have to do. And all of a sudden, somehow mysteriously, you get back up there. But you keep trying to figure it out because you keep getting pushed down, and then you keep trying to figure out how to get back up there. So a compliment is something that's nice, but it's not consistent. You can do wrong. You're not like a superhero. Because remember, when somebody actually visualizes us as somebody that can do no wrong, guess what? That's sad, because they're already putting us in a position that we're going to fail. Okay? And the problem is that it feels really good in the beginning to be on that pedestal. Sean, great to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. That was awesome. Narcs are still more difficult, especially when you can't get away from them because you had kids with them. Co-parenting with somebody with a cluster B program is tough. That's tough. We probably need to talk about that in an upcoming video of some sort. How do you do that? How do you co-parent with somebody like that? And that's a good question. Co-parenting with someone with cluster B program. And that's something we can talk about as well. Because that's really hard. How do you deal with it? How do you get through it? Dark Radica, to me, it's getting clear. I have to end this. In 1 week, I'll take her to rehab, and then it's done for me. My energy is drained. It's hurt. No contact. You know what? And the best thing to do is that when somebody does have a drug addiction, if we can get them help, even though they might not like us for it, we're doing the right thing. And you know what? We're doing the right thing by them and us. And the hardest thing is to do that, because sometimes it's easier just to acquiesce, let them do the drugs because they're fun and they're in a good mood while they're doing it. But you know what? It's the right thing to do. And if it's meant to be, they'll come back. If it's meant to be, she'll come back in a different way, and y'all can work out the differences. But her under the influence is not. It's not ever going to change anything. Jimmy, great to hear from you. Codependent heaven and hell. Gotcha. I totally understand. Sam, good to hear from you. And later act like nothing happens. That's very true. That's very true. Lisa, yes, I'm glad that you are NJNP, and thank you very much. By the way, Jasmine, thank you very much. Yeah, core is figure out, expose their fake souls. They're mirroring all good things you're interested in, and you think you have common ground and fall in love with the narcissist. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the mirroring, the thing is that sometimes they can mirror you and you feel as though they're the exact copy, like a replica of. You're like, wow, they like all the same things I do, and this is amazing. But if you really start peeling back from some folks, you realize that they actually don't have their own identity. And being able to see that someone doesn't have their own identity can really help you offset a problem. You know, when you see someone does not have identity, they can change with the wind. And the problem with that too is they can be your friend, they can be there for you, they can change in a moment's notice because they don't have any identity or values to stand by. And that's always a painful position to be in. Nelson, I love that. No empathy for abusers. There you go. I like that. Zen and me, thank you, by the way. I appreciate you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I need to get back in the gym a little more. I've been doing a lot more cardio. But I am going to do, I've been doing weights too for a while, but I need to do even more. You leave work so late, quite honestly. We'll leave here probably in about half an hour, and we got to get some groceries and all this great stuff. And then George is going to drive me home because my car got towed today to go get worked on again. But definitely we'll try to go to the gym later. I appreciate you saying that though. You rock. Thank you so much. And so that's the key, is that it's like, once we kind of see this dynamic and we realize that when someone doesn't have a true identity, they can shift on us, we begin to realize how important it is that we surround ourselves with people that actually have identities, true identities, recognizable identity. Okay, Jet, what about feeling bad for them when you break up after recognizing they may be toxic for you, but they didn't necessarily hurt us yet? Okay, yeah, so, that's the thing too, is feeling bad for someone. Even though you've seen the patterns, you've seen it, you've realized it's not healthy. That's part of the program, is to feel bad, to go back, because that's what we've been trained to do, because we were raised around that same component back at mom and dad's house. So what we have to do is we have to be okay with the feeling of feeling sorry for them and begin to turn that feeling into us and say, what is it about me that I can begin to examine? Why do I always feel sorry for them and I put myself last? Why do I always feel sorry for them and put myself last? Because guess what? We don't think about ourselves. That's why we think about other people, because we want to offset it. TRX Media. Yes, your mom and your brothers are both narcs. I know. I can understand why you don't want to be in the same room with them. I get that. Yeah, and I mean, especially if they're setting you up, especially if they're ganging up on you, you definitely don't want to do that, because a lot of times they'll gang up on you because they if you're nice, and they'll see you as being weak. And anybody that sees a nice person as weak is not somebody that you really want to spend time with. Mike Brown, great to hear from you. How are you doing? Great to see you. And Annie, great to see you. How do you leave a BPD after 30 years when they have threatened suicide? Oh, that's painful. Well, it depends on if they've threatened suicide before. And if they have, they probably didn't go with it. That's something that you have to ask, is this another control? And that's what you need to look at, is that you can't be controlled by someone telling you they're going to do something to try to control you in the relationship. And if you really do think that they could kill themselves, you need to get them help. They probably will run from that. But we want to be prepared, because you don't need to be sequestered into something that you don't want to be in. And that's something I really want you to think about. And if they have said that they're going to have if they have threatened suicide before, I want you to look at the last times they threatened it. Did they do anything? If they didn't do anything, Is this full manipulation? If they did, then you want to get some help. You'll want to get them in somewhere, or at least start contacting people to let them know about your significant other, so that you will feel safe with doing this, because I know that you don't want to have that burden upon you. And it's not fair that to me, I'm not saying it's always manipulation, because people do commit suicide, but I said, you really need to think, is part of that manipulation to keep you in the relationship? It's a big question. Realize that it's their choice. The trust is gone. Yeah, and if the trust is gone on some of these relationships, guys, and there's no way of getting it back, you know what? Sometimes it's time to move on. Sometimes it's time to move on. And we have to get right with ourselves. Sometimes it might not be the time to work as a couple. It might need to be working on my own self, and understanding, why was I in this relationship? Why did I stand for this for so long? How can I regain my power? And what do I need to do to stand strong? And I think that's important. And so those are some keys. But I really, I really appreciate everybody tuning in, because I think really what we're doing here is understanding our value, being able to see ourselves honestly, understanding what we need to do. But better yet, what I want to leave you with tonight, because I got to jump here in a second, is that I want to leave you with the fact that we have this one life here on this planet right now to live our life and to learn about ourselves. If we're in an environment that we can be ourselves and be honest and open and healthy, that's where we need to be at. If we're being squashed, manipulated, gaslit, controlled, told how bad we are, this is not a healthy environment. Okay, so we got to figure out how to let it go. Even though our programming has told us that it's okay to be in that environment, it's not okay for us. And so even though it might hurt, there may be fear. Even though somebody might threaten things. Even if somebody tells us what they're going to do. Or even if we start feeling bad. When we start feeling bad for them, what's happening? Why are we feeling bad? Is it because it's an old program? Most definitely. Most definitely. It's an old program. And we have to understand why that is and what's happening from that. Okay. And right when we feel like we're going down the old program, we got to get aware. We got to be aware. Okay. Right when you feel sorry for the person that you've been trying to leave, or right when you feel sorry for the person that's kind of been beating you down for a long time, why am I feeling sorry for them? Get in the guts of it. Why am I feeling sorry? Why do I constantly turn it and make and feel sorry for them? What about me? Where are my feelings? Why haven't I looked at how I feel? Because that's another way of what? Of putting someone else first, ahead of who we are, ahead of our identity, and ahead of our purpose. Kurt, great to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in. Sean, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you. Jamie, thank you so much. I'm so glad you tuned in. Annie, thank you for tuning in. Dark Radica, I'm glad that you tuned in, and I'm glad that it was helpful. Looking forward to hearing from you and how things work out. Zen and me, thank you. Jasmine, thank you so much. I am so glad that y'all tuned in. And in the meantime, just think about this. I mean, this is important. It's all about who we are, what we stand for. And even if we don't know exactly what we stand for, a lot of times if we don't know, it's because guess what? We haven't been given the opportunity to really explore ourselves. And sometimes we need that opportunity. Everybody does. And so remember that, like, there's fear of being alone, right? But the reality of getting to learn about ourselves in an environment where we're not put down for being ourselves is so much more gratifying. And then we'll eventually find a person that can accept us for who we are. Not just accept us, but actually see our value. Because guess what? They had to do the work to see their value. Okay, so we're going to be talking more about that. You remember the radio show is this Saturday at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. I'll be talking about something we probably talked about today, but, for about an hour, a little less than this time, but a little under an hour on the show. So tune in. We'll be here if you have a chance. For the next show, the next conversation, I'd love to hear from y'all of what maybe some ideas of what you would like to hear about. Vaughn, good to hear from you. Is being triggered bad, or is it a gift that allows us to disconnect from that trigger? Yes, triggering is just another observation of what we're dealing with. It's another guidepost. It's like, when we're triggered by something, why the hell am I triggered by that? Okay, that's it. I mean, I used to, when I got triggered back in the day, I'd be like, you sit there and fight with the other person and argue and see who could get louder and all that stuff. But it's like, wait a second. Now I realize if I am triggered, because now I work through a lot of my triggers, we all have triggers no matter how much we work on them. Okay, there's always little bitty ones. But now it's like when I get triggered by something, like, whoa, what's that about? What's within me that upset me? Okay, and this can be an eye-opening experience. So yes, I love your question, Vaughn. Thank you. Yes, it's an opportunity. And that's how we have to look at these things too. We can't just beat ourselves up like I found another bad relationship. It's an opportunity to learn about ourselves. Kirk, love that. We flourish when we have others who make us better, not worse. Totally agree. Sam, great to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Anna, great from you. Anna, great to hear from you. How are you doing? How are you? Great to see you here. It's always good times, when we're dealing with understanding ourselves and understanding our connection and what we want out of our life, right? And so, yes, if we are being triggered, what's emotionally triggering us? Why is it triggering us? What is at our core that we are defending something adamantly, right? Because you know what? Usually that's an old program that we're defending and we've lived with it for a long, long time. If you just catching in, definitely catch the rest of the show. We're about to jump off here in a second. We're about to turn off all the lights, put everything up, and then I have to go to the grocery store to pick up some groceries. Got to pick up some groceries. George is going to drive me because my car just went back to the shop today. We'll have to talk about that at more length at some point. But yeah, so we're going to do that. I'm going to go home and see Buddy, see how he's doing, bring him up to the office tomorrow. But, if you have any questions or thoughts, just let me know. If you want to contact me directly, want to work with me directly, just go to ashleyburgess.com. Just click on that contact page. It's like on the top, you got Ashley, you got you got like the little tabs, and there's one at the very end that says contact. Just click on it. If you scroll down, you'll see like a form, and you put the name and you put your email address in there, the one that I can email you back at, and then just put, whatever you want to send me, whatever information that you want to send me that you think is pertinent that I need to know, put it in there. I'm the only one that reads that. So, just me, only me. So yeah, so if it takes me like a day or two to get to you, it's just because I have a lot of, people reaching out, but I will reach out to you and I will respond. So don't worry about that. And I love to hear from you, and I love to hear information or anything that you want to share with me. Vaughn, thank you so much. Sean, thank you so much. NJNP. Oh my gosh, you bought my book a few years ago. Awesome. I hope you liked it. I really hope you liked it. I'm going to be writing another one soon. I have a new masterclass coming out here shortly, and I'll be writing a couple of books around that, so it could be interesting. It's going to be an interesting project, but we'll be launching that sooner than later. It's done. We're just waiting it out, so we'll put it out there. But I think it might be something that you might really, everyone might really connect with. Kirk, thank you so much. Oh yeah, Kirk's reaching out. He's signing out to you, George. Nice. Kirk, you know that what we got over here. So I appreciate you. Also think about it. My values. What are my values? Start thinking about that. If I'm being triggered, why am I being triggered? Start analyzing. Start journaling. Getting this stuff out of your mind. If you're dealing with people who are putting you down or calling you names or making you feel bad, think about it. What am I dealing with? Start looking within them. Start seeing their issues because they got some deficits that they're dealing with. Don't just keep harboring it for yourself. Start looking at the truth behind why the person's doing it, okay? That'll help you to understand them. We're not trying to acquiesce or feel sorry for them. Gives us a balance of understanding, then we're able to really see things clearly. Because a lot of times when somebody's telling us how bad we are, right, we begin to believe it. That's the last thing we should do, okay? We don't want to believe when somebody's telling us how bad we are. Not a good thing. Okay, because that becomes programmed into our brain. We begin to believe it. No, don't do it. But it's hard. What I just said was extremely hard. So I want you to see what's really happening, understanding where it's coming from, journaling, keeping that journal in a private place so that other people can't read it, really focusing on that and understanding yourself, because each thing that's happening that we're upset or angry or we get irritated, or just all that is really trying to get to the core of who we are. Okay. Some of it can be amazing epiphanies and loving epiphanies, and others of it can just be complete and utter irritation. But all of it directly reflects on us learning about us. Thank you for tuning in, Lauren, thank you for tuning in. Lawrence, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Text Media, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll move to another country 4 hours away. I love that. Okay, great. I'm loving it. I'm glad that you're moving. So that's... Can't wait. So you're going to be close. That's great. So I'm here, And anybody have any questions or concerns, just let me know. Questions, comments, thoughts, go on the contact page. Also, if you, I'll put something on the community page here probably before we leave on content for next week. And then we're going to put up another video probably at the beginning of next week on love languages. Most of you know about them. I think core wounds and that kind of stuff is really deep, but love language is something to experience too, because we got to kind of understand that. It's a little piece of it. It's a piece of the puzzle, right? So I wanted to do that, and that'll be out. And then Saturday, don't forget the show. 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. And it'll be a good conversation, and love to have you, because the conversation's a whole heck of a lot better when you're here. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night. I love you. I care about you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. Okay. And Delilah, great to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in. And, I do this. I love doing it. I love helping, and I love connecting with y'all. And, don't forget to live your true life. I'm here just to help you to figure out what that looks like, living your true life and not acquiescing to other people's idea of what they want your life to be. Good night. Take care. Love you.